Hi everyone, and welcome to the basic spider demo here. I got a couple black rods, Fetra black rods, and what we're going to do is we're just going to build up a little gather here and make a little spider. Now, in this demo here, I don't give all the instructions on how to practice this, but in the instructional, I'm going to have a little practice section in there. It actually shows you a little bit more detail how to do the legs and so forth. That's where everybody will struggle at for the most part. And you guys can go out to my website. You guys will be able to see that instructional out there. Most part, this is just a little demo, and I'm going to just create a little paddle here, and we're just going to make a little basic spider. So here I'm just going to squish some glass down, get a little paddle, and then we're going to stripe this paddle up. So here I'm taking out the chill marks. It's getting nice and warm. Looks like I don't have a big enough paddle, so I'm going to melt this in, and I'm going to make it a little bit bigger probably. Yeah, that's what I'm doing here, just making it a little bigger. As most of you know, most of the demos now, I just pretty much leave everything in the video, and I go ahead and explain either any pitfalls I ran into, or just things on the fly that sometimes you have to do. Looks like I got a little bit of scuzz on there, so I'm gonna peel some of it off. That's probably the main reason to rebuild that paddle. It's because I saw some of that scuzz in there. So pull some of it off, and we can always melt it back and get a bigger paddle. Again, this is just a demo. We're just making a little spider here, and we're just going to build a little paddle. We'll squish it down, and then we'll stripe it up with some white and make this a nice little black and white spider, or white and black spider. There we go. That's a little bigger paddle. And the white I'm using, it's a Fetra white. You guys can use any colors you want. I made black and green, black and yellow, just whatever you guys want to do. These are just basics. I don't add any animals or anything like that. The tail I kind of put in, like a little, spike at the end, so it looks like it's got, some bite to it. But you can get a little bit more elaborate with these. The hardest part on making these spiders is get the shaping down, proportions, but the most difficult part is probably making the legs straight. That's something that I explain in the instructional. So here I'm just striping on some glass. Just make sure I don't make any voids in there. Make sure that glass is flowing nice and hot. Now, depending on what look you're looking for, how much white you want into the paddle or how much black you want into it, you can stripe this thinner, or you can stripe it thicker. I'm going to probably add a lot more glass here of the white. That way there's more white than there is black. I want the black lines to show up. That's why I'm striping it on the black side. But you could make the core white and then put black on the outside, and you'll have a different look. And this is just the basic shape of a paddle. I had a little void there, so I'm filling it in. Make sure I don't have any holes or anywhere for it to crack later on from. And I want an even coat. I don't want it to be lopsided, obviously. So I'm laying it on pretty thick. This will probably end up being just a little bit bigger than a nickel size, less than a quarter. Now attach my punty onto the other side, and then we'll pump some heat into this and twist it out. And that'll be the beginning stages for the body of the spider. Now I'm just pumping heat into it. Now we're just building the core heat up here so we can start doing our twist. Now there's just one way I make them. I mean, there's other ways to make the body of the spider and so forth. You can add more detail to it. Right there, I'm just making sure, pushing in and out. Make sure it's moving around a little bit before I start twisting. So I'll pump some more heat into it. Get it nice and hot. And now I'll start to slowly twist into it. One hand I'm just kind of dragging a little bit, while the other hand I'm making the twist. Depending on how fast you do this, you can make them lines nice and tight. You can make them thicker and not as many twists. It's all up to you guys. However you want it to look. So here I'm melting the ends in, just deciding which side I want to use. So I'm making sure there's a nice flow to it on that side, and I'll do the same in the middle and make sure there's a flow to the other side. And then I'll make a decision which side I want to actually use for the tail and which side I actually want to use for the rest of the body. So I'm kind of scoping it out here, just kind of looking at it, seeing which way I like it to go better. And it looks like I'm going to use the left side for the tail probably, or the punty, because that's what I'll be holding it with. So what I'm trying to do is thicken up the base of it. That way I can pull it out to use it as a punty, but I don't want to lose my line, so you got to be careful here and go nice and slow. It stretched out a little bit there. I think I had an itch on my nose or something. So we'll just gather it back up a little bit and go slow. Sometimes those things happen. You have to pause, take a break. Here I'm just trying to slowly stretch that rod out on the left. That's going to be used for my punty, because I'm going to end up taking that punty off, so I need it to be pretty thin. And then now I'll pull a little bit off here. And I'm just thinning it out, that way I don't lose the white or the stripes in it. And I'm just going nice and slow. And at some point I can probably pull the one on the left side off. That way I can clean up the rest of that black a little bit, pull some of that black off. That way it looks a little bit more seamless. So I'll pull that one off. And now I'm going to clean up the end there, because there's a little bit of more black on there than what I would like. I mean, you could leave it obviously and just burn it in. But I'm going to go ahead and round this out just a little bit more. Gather it up. And then I'll pull some of that black off the end there, and that'll pull the stripeness to all the way to the end of the tail. And you want a nice clean termination is what you're wanting here, and that's what I'm looking for. So I'm just going to reach up there and I'm going to start pulling some of that black. I'm just going slow. I don't want to pull it out too fast because then it'll all thin out into a stringer. You don't want that to happen. You're just pulling nice and slow. I'm just trying to pull just the black only off. There we go. Now there's not so much black on there. It doesn't look like a big old glob. And then I'll pull this black out, all thinning it out all the way to the tip. And then now I can burn that off. And now I can make my punty attachment. So this will be a thin, stringer attachment basically, but it is a punty. I'm not putting any whip in this or anything like that. All I'm doing is making a straight attachment. I'm going to pull it a little thin. That way later on I can come back to the flame and flame cut it later on at the very end. So here I'm just pumping some heat into it. And I'm going to attach that rod as a punty, and I'm going to pull it slightly and make the little tail shape. So I want this stinger to be kind of downward a little bit, but you need to make sure you keep it on center. You don't want a crooked one. So when you pull this, you want to pull it straight and then downward just slightly. That's what I'm doing here. And then you want to keep it on center. You don't want it to be lopsided. So now I'm kind of warming it up so I can kind of see where I'm at. There we go. And now I'll probably make sure it's all straight, because you don't want to be turning this thing over and it be lopsided, because then you'll put the rest of it on lopsided too. I got a little bit more to work with there, making it straight. You want it all to be on center. There we go, almost there. And there we have it. Now I'm going to work on the body of the spider. This will be where you'll attach the legs to and everything. So this shaping here is takes some practice to get to, and it's something I explain how to do in the instructional too. Now, I don't show you how to practice the legs in the demo, but in the instructional there'll be some practice sections on how to actually practice making the legs straight from one bend to the next. But here you're just building up the body so you can attach the legs. And this section here is just a little heat, and you want to stay away from the body of the or the tail section, and you want to just melt in just the body. And I'm leaving it kind of hot there still, that way I can come back to it, because I don't want it to be like a bumblebee section or anything like that. I want this to be melted in. It's going to be a little thicker, so here I'm putting a flat spot on the bottom of that body section. And proportion size, it's really close to the same amount of glass. So here it's not quite centered up, so I'm pumping in some more heat to center that up. I'm going to add some more glass to it and push it together a little bit more. And then you'll see me kind of melt it into the tail section of it. There we go. Now I'm going to melt it in just slightly. That way it's thickening up closer to the tail section. And then that way when I do my final shaping here, it all looks symmetrical. So it's getting a little warm. It's a little short piece of glass I'm just trying to use there. So I'm just going slow, keeping it warm. And I'm working it back towards the tail section. You see some of that heat. I'm kind of stretching it out just slightly. That way when I touch down on the marver this time, it creates a nice flat spot on the bottom. And you want to kind of have it angled up a little bit too. Just slightly. So it's like half of the size of the tail section, but it's more elongated. And then here I'm going to burn it off. I got the shaping that I want and the amount of glass I want. So now I'm going to kind of melt that back in, the tip back in there, and I'm going to touch down, make sure I keep that flat spot. And now I'm just rounding out the top so it looks more symmetrical. Keep that flat spot on there, using that marble on top of my torch. And now I have a place to place the legs on. So at this point, I'm not going to go back to that tail section till the very end and burn the tip of it off so I can take off that punty. So that part can go ahead and get cold now, or it can slowly cool down. And then now here you're going to keep this whole section warm while you place this legs on. It is kind of key how you get these legs in there, because you don't want to get them too close to the tail section, because then it'll fracture. So I'm just slightly in there and I'm pulling backwards a little bit and down. And I'm going to clean it up. And these are usually a little bit bigger than I normally do, because I like to put 4 legs in there and then put the mandibles in and stuff like that. But this one I'm just going to put in 4 legs, no mandibles, just something nice and basic that everybody can do. There's the next section to another leg. And we'll put 4 legs on each side. And I like to flop back and forth. I usually start from the back because it's the closest to the tail section, so I can kind of get that done first because it cools off the fastest. Whereas here I'm working towards the front, stays a little bit more warmer there, and a little bit more heat. If you don't get these perfect, it's okay. You know, it takes a little bit of practice, and you'll be able to handle them. And then place these last 2. So if you pull off a little too short, you can heat it back up and, you know, add a little bit more or pull it to a point. There we go. I'll make one more last connection right there, right in the front. Now we have 8 legs ready. I've just kind of pulled those to a point, because now what you're going to do is you're going to end up turning down your flame so that you can handle just the tips of these points. We're done with the body section now. And as this starts cooling off, the only thing that we're focusing now on are just the legs only, and the little tips of those joints, and for each section. So depending on how many joints you want, you can make as many joints as you want in these spiders. I go with those 4 joints. There's one, I'll add a second one that'll be black. The third one I'll add will be white, and then the last one will be the end of the leg. So here I turn my torch down. You can see nice super pinpoint flame, because you're going to need to have angles in here. It's going to be important that you use the angles to the torch to where you don't hit the body of the spider, because if you hit the body of the spider, it will break. And then you'll be all mad and have to start over. There's been many of those. So here I'm just heating up the rod, and now you'll see me kind of angle the torch in to the back leg that I want to attach to. And now I'm going to go ahead and make the attachment. Make sure the glass flows into one another. And then I'm going to pull the next section of the leg. And then I'll burn that off, and that'll give me that section of the leg. I'll just clean it up, and that's probably roughly 3/4 of an inch long. You make them as long as you want. You make them in different directions and so forth, and you'll see as I start to finish this out which directions I'm taking those in. So again, I'm pinpoint flame. I'm working just the tip, getting it melted in. You need to be careful here with these back ones because those are the ones that'll get that tail section a little too warm and it'll fracture on you. And then it's just like pulling stringers out. Just go nice and slow. You want them all to be symmetrically length the same. So you kind of want them almost like dog bones, so thin in the middle, and then where the connections are, they're a little bit thicker and tapered. So here I'm cleaning it up so I can make sure they're the same size. And then we'll move on to the next section, or the next leg. So I kind of like to go left, or the right side to the left side, and then back and forth all the way to the front. That's the process I take with it, but you guys can do either way. I just do it this way because it seems a little easier to get into those sections because I'm right-handed. But if you're left-handed, I would have probably went the other way first, only because the angle that I hold it at will allow the flame to get beyond those other legs, especially later on. And now we'll move into the next one. Again, I'm just heating the tips up just enough to make them flow. And as they're flowing in, I'll wait for it to cool down just like you do stringers, and then you pull them. And you can pull them as thin as you want or as thick as you want. I just like to make them symmetrical so that when I apply the next color on there, they kind of, are the same length and size of the color. And so now what I'll do is I'll go ahead and do the next one and just work our way all the way up to the front. And again, this is just like pulling stringers, not too hard. Hardest part is pulling them straight, and there's a little technique I use to do that with. Now, I don't make all the legs come up at the same angle because I want some of the bends to look like it's crawling. So I'll go ahead and maneuver some of the legs straight up. I'll maneuver some of the legs straight out. I'll kind of bend them in a direction I think that the spider looks like it's moving in. And you'll see closer as we get further down the line here with the legs which bends I'm making and so forth. You guys can make your own bends whichever way you want. Key is to make sure that these connections flow, because if they don't flow, this is where they'll fracture at. And I always like to cut them a little long because I can always clean it up and pull a little bit off. That's the process I take, and then I look at it and make sure they're all the same size. And then now we'll do the front ones. And you can see I started on the left side this time for the front because the right one's going to be a little bit harder to get to. And that's why I'm going to do that one last. Only the reason why is because I'm pulling this one in a very steep angle upward. Now that last one's on the left side, so now it's a little bit easier to angle it and then put the glass in there. It's a little bit different angle. So it's all going to be, you'll have to keep an eye on how your angle of your flame is to the angle of the glass that you're hitting. You can see I turned it there so I can get both sides of that little nub warm. That way the glass will flow. That glass don't flow, you'll have a bad connection, and then that connection will fracture off. It may not fracture off now, but it will later. And it's usually right at the end when you're about ready to be done with the piece. That's usually when, if you've done it wrong, that's usually when it happens. But there we go, I'm pulling it out. Now I got all the first sections done, or the second sections done on the spider. So it's starting to come together now a little bit. So here I'm showing off one of the other spiders here that I've made. I'm not putting any mandibles in. It'll be just like that spider there. You can see the other one there. I got a green and black one there in the bottom left corner. That one has mandibles. We'll show that one at the very end. But for a basic spider, you want to go slow and make sure you get all the positions down and so forth before you start putting mandibles in. You can do a little bit better on the tail too. I mean, some of them I'll actually put, they're like two little horns on there, so it looks like the tail section is a little bit more ominous looking. You can put stuff into the body of them, all kinds of stuff. So here I'm pulling it out. Now I'm going backwards a little bit because that's where a spider will have its first leg stand. I'm pulling straight out. And I'm deciding how long I want this one. Usually they're around 3/4 to an inch, depending on how big of the body of the spider is. Proportion is something that you'll have to learn how to control. And we do it the same way as I did the last one. So I did one left, now I'll do the one back right one. I just go one at a time. And I just clean up the ends. And then I make sure they're the same size. This one on the right hand side looks a little bit longer, so I'll clean it up a little bit and make it the same length as the one on the right, as the one is on the left. And now I'll decide what angle I want to pull this next one at. And again, I'm just heating up the tips, putting them together, make sure they flow, and then you can pull your little, basically like pulling a little stringer. And I'll go back and clean those ones up, make sure they're the same length. And now we're ready for another leg. The white is a little bit soupier, so you have to wait a little bit longer to pull the leg out. Black sets up a little bit faster, so it's a little bit easier. The white's a little bit harder to work with. And I'm just pulling these legs out here at an angle that I know I want them to look at. So I've kind of predetermined which angles I like best, with all the spiders I do. So I kind of like the look that they are crawling with one leg reaching out. You guys can experiment and, get your own style of legs and which way you like them to look. And again, this is in soft glass. You could do this in Boro too as well. There's nothing says you can't do the same process. It will take a little bit longer. You'll probably have to use, a handheld torch too as well to get in those angles that you want. The welds and stuff like that would be a little bit harder to do in Boro, but they can be done the same exact way. And this is the leg that I usually like leaving upward, or looks like it's reaching out. This leg I got pointing straight up, but it's usually the bend is pretty straight. I don't leave it straight out because this is the leg I usually like to put straight down. That way it looks like it can jump at you almost, or whatever. Makes them a little bit more ominous looking. And there we have it. Another set of 8 sections. And you're just cleaning them up. And that's the third section to each leg. And now I'll work on the last section. Now this last section is pretty key because you want to pull them at the same angle again, and then you need to pull them downward so the spider will actually have legs to set on. Now I normally, at the very least, like to have at least 3 legs touch, and preferably 4. But normally the front leg and 1 or 2 of the other legs I usually have lifted off the ground. I like them to be pretty sturdy. So I'm just pulling down here, and then at the very end I'm straightening it out so that it'll look like it has some toes there, or a little toe. I'm just cleaning them up so they don't look like little balls on the end. They look like they're pointed. And so now I got that one pulled downward. Now I'll do the other one on the back side. It's not so bad now. You're pretty far away from the tail section, so you just got to take that same angle. And remember, what you're burning in the back is not in the flame either, so you don't want part of the other leg in there. So now I'm just pulling it down. Now I'll burn it off. Now I'm just kind of guessing at which way the angle is that they will sit level on a pad. So I'm going to pull that, get that little toe out, and then I'm going to probably take a little look at it. On the side here, I'll pull the little marver out, make sure that both toes are touching and the spider is level. So that's kind of what I'm doing off here on the side there, in front of you. There you go. So I'm just kind of making sure that the toes touch down, the spider's level, and I can move on to the next section. So this gives me an idea of which or how much to pull the next set of legs downward so they match the next one. So I'm just kind of guessing, And then what I'll do is I'll reach up there again, look at it, and if I need to clean up the legs again, I'll clean them up a little bit and make sure that they touch. Now there are some legs that won't touch, obviously, but you want at least a couple in the front touching and a couple in the back touching. That's my preference. They seem to be more sturdy that way and more stable too. So again, the white is a little bit easier to get the flow. So you got to be careful you don't melt so much that you don't have any left to touch down with. And then the black, I'm just kind of waiting for it to cool down a little bit before I pull. That way I make sure the legs are all the same size. I'm just cleaning those little toes up just a little bit. And now I'm just making sure, looking at it to make sure all the toes are touching down or at the same angle, touching on the marver, and they sit at the angle I want. You don't want your spider to look lopsided, so you want to make sure they all touch at the same angle. And so I do this while I'm working it. I don't wait till the very end. I mean, you could, and then you have to clean them all up at the same time. I just find it easier to make sure that they're level up front. It's just less work I have to do later on. And then that way at the very end, if I think I need to, move something around, and I'll show you guys how to move these little joints too. You'll see me move one little joint because I didn't get it. I got it too steep of an angle. And then we're on to the next one. And getting all these angles down and everything, it just takes practice, so don't get discouraged if you don't get it right the first time, obviously. I tell everybody it takes about 100 of them before you learn to perfect it a little bit. I probably haven't made a spider in probably over a year. It's that time of year anyway. Next month I'll probably sell a few. Or right before Halloween anyway. Here I'm just kind of cleaning it up and burning it off in the flame. Make sure it stays a point. Sometimes you'll get a little ball at the very end. Those don't look right. So here I'm testing again. Make sure I like the level of it. Make sure that some toes are touching. It looks like I got 2 more sections to put on. And then we'll show you how to disconnect it from the punty. So here I'm actually touching the joint right at the edge of where the spider's body is. So that little joint there, I'm trying to heat up enough so I can push that leg down, because I didn't like it because it never touched when I was on the marver with it. So I need to move the whole leg all the way forward so that that leg touches. That's probably the balancing point of where the spider touches its gate at, where it sits level. So I want to make sure it was touching the marver. That's one of those points that I like to make sure it sits level on. And so now I'll get the next section on there. So sometimes you can get into those joints and it'll work out just fine. Sometimes those joints will fracture off. You go back to heat them up. That was the chance I was willing to take to do that with. You just got to gently heat them up. And that way you can move the whole leg instead of just one joint at a time. I just moved that joint and then the whole leg fell forward. And then it touches now. And that's what I'm doing here, is I'm checking it on the marver on the left. I'm cleaning it up a little bit more. And now I got one more leg attachment to make. And this is the top leg where I will have it looking outward, like it's, trying to grab onto something, or it's going to walk, or whatever you want it to look like. So this one never touches the ground. It's just one of those ones I like having sticking up. And so I like to have it pull out at an angle. And I'll burn it off. Depending on which way you want that point, I like to have them pointed outward. So I'll clean that up. Put the little toe in it. And flame cut it. Now I'm giving it a little look, make sure I like the look of it. I don't need to adjust any of the legs. Everything looks good. I'm going to go ahead and hold down here, make sure all the legs are touching before I got 4 legs touching, so I'm happy with it. And so now I'll go ahead and I'll take that punty off. So at this point you should be able to touch it and grab it. Obviously I'm giving it little tiny gentle touches, make sure it's not hot anymore, and it's not. So now I can actually hold it with my fingers, and then I'll just burn that tail off. Now I'm working way back towards the rod, that way I'm not close to the tail section and fracture the piece. Heat it up, pull it off. Now I can switch hands, and I can use some tweezers and whatever else I need, the rod or whatever, to clean that up. And I want this kind of look like a stinger almost, or whatever you want to call it. That's how I like to make the basic ones look. And you can put, the tail section in, where you have the 2 antennas there that look. I can't even think the name of that. What that is. Anyway, they're the tail section that's the stinger part of it. And here I'm just going to clean it up. Sometimes fractures happen. There we go. Warm that rod up. And here I'm just kind of cleaning it up. I'm just kind of getting a little warm, attaching to it, and now I'm going to pull it to a point. And that way it looks nice and straight there and everything. You want it kind of downward a little bit. And there we have it. Nice little spider. I think that the end of that piece was probably, where the spider's butt is, or the spinnard, or you call it a barb, whatever you want. But here we go. I got it all done there, and give you guys a little picture or a little video of what it looks like when it's all done. And there you have it. Nice little basic spider. And you get a little bit more detail in these spiders if you want. You can add mandibles, stuff like that. So at the very into this video here, I'll show you the green one I had down on the bottom left hand corner there. You can see the mandibles on the front. Looks a little bit more ominous looking, but basically the same thing. You can do those too, so you can add a lot more detail to these spiders if you want. Alright, and that's pretty much the end of it. Thanks for coming out and watching.